Rabbi David Cohen, a respected figure, collapsed in his home just before Shabbat. His heart stopped. Medics fought to revive him, unaware that his soul had already passed into another realm. What he saw shattered everything he believed he knew. David, a devout Jewish scholar, had always rejected Jesus until he met him face to face after his death. This phenomenon extends beyond a mere near-death experience. A radical revelation has completely transformed a rabbi's life. My name is David Cohen. I was born into an Orthodox Jewish family in Brooklyn, New York. From the time I could walk, I was raised in the rhythm of tradition. Morning prayers with my father, Hebrew school in the afternoons, and Shabbat dinners that lasted late into the night, with discussions about Torah and Talmud around the table. Faith was more than just a belief. It was a part of our identity. It influenced every moment, decision, and breath. By my early 20s, I knew I wanted to be a rabbi. My determination was not due to a desire for prestige or power, but rather because the Torah had captured my soul. It was more than just scripture for me. It was divine architecture. Every letter, pause, and law was infused with meaning. I believed the Torah was God's direct revelation to the Jewish people, and I made it my mission to understand it thoroughly and teach it to others with accuracy and reverence. I spent years in yeshiva studying all day and night, memorizing not only the Torah but also the Mishnah, Talmud, and sages' writings. My teachers were men of outstanding discipline and insight, and I tried everything I could to follow in their footsteps. I eventually became ordained and took on the role of congregational rabbi. My days were spent studying, teaching, providing pastoral care, and guiding our community in prayer and practice. I adored my people. I loved our traditions. I loved the responsibility of guiding others in our ancestors' footsteps. I never took it lightly. I believed in the covenant given to Abraham and reaffirmed through Moses. That covenant defined us as a chosen people, bound by law, tradition, and identity. Christianity was never something I disliked or mocked. I had Christian friends growing up, and I admired their dedication to family and prayer. But I saw their faith as misaligned, sincere perhaps, but founded on theological errors. To me, Jesus was a Jewish teacher who became the focal point of a religion that strayed from its original path. The Messiah was supposed to bring lasting peace, rebuild the temple, and reunite the exiles, not die on a Roman cross. That did not make sense to me. When Christians attempted to speak to me about Jesus, I would politely listen but decline further conversation. I would occasionally offer a respectful counterpoint from the Torah to clarify our position, but never with anger or contempt. I was not anti-Christian. I simply believed they were incorrect. I saw Jesus as a historical figure, not the Messiah, and not divine. I believed in one God, indivisible and eternal, and in a faith based on mitzvot, or commandments, rather than grace or atonement through a man. I was confident in my belief. Grounded. My certainty was not arrogance. It resulted from decades of research, prayer, and spiritual wrestling. I had built my life on truth, or so I thought. I was a man with discipline, conviction, and integrity. My heart was sincere. My devotion was genuine. And I never thought anything could shake it. Until one day, everything changed. My life had a consistent rhythm, a sacred pattern etched in time by generations before me. I would get up before sunrise, wrap the veil around my arm and forehead, and whisper my morning prayers with purpose. Each word of the Shema and each blessing from the Amidah was spoken out of devotion rather than routine. After prayer, I'd meet with a small group of men at our synagogue for Torah study before breakfast. We'd argue in love, debating interpretations and wrestling with commentaries from Rashi, Rambam, and the ancient sages. These sessions were essential to my mental health. They sharpened my thinking and increased my admiration for God's wisdom. I spent most of my mornings preparing lessons. I taught in our synagogue's Beit Midrash, guiding young men through complex Talmud passages while emphasizing kavanah, intentionality, in their learning. I pushed them to understand, challenge, and absorb the heartbeat of the law rather than simply reciting it. The afternoons were reserved for counseling. Congregants would come in with questions, some practical, others existential. I'd guide a young couple through the rules of Tahat Hamash Pasha, family purity, sit with a grieving widow and recite Tehillim, or mediate disputes with care and fairness. These moments helped to ground me. I wasn't simply a scholar. I was at home, and life was warm but modest. Miriam, my wife, was my rock, steadfast, wise, and deeply spiritual. Every Friday evening, she lit the Shabbat candles through tears. We raised 3 children together, observing and loving. They attended Jewish schools, learned Hebrew from a young age, and never ate outside our kosher kitchen. Friday afternoons were always memorable. The entire house was transformed, clean, quiet, and filled with the aromas of challah and roasted chicken. We'd gather around the table, bless the wine and bread, and sing Zimurot before getting into lively Torah discussions. It was more than just a tradition, it was life. It was a joyful experience. To me, God's presence was not distant, it was present in every detail. The law was not a burden, it was a gift. Every commandment, every halakhic detail, was an opportunity to draw closer to the divine. My worldview was profoundly covenantal. We were a people on a mission, chosen not because we were superior, but because God entrusted us with his message. I didn't need proof that God exists. I saw him in childbirth, calendar rhythms, and our people's survival. I did not question the veracity of the Torah. I lived it. Even when confronted with theological questions about other faiths, particularly Christianity, I remained firm. I believe they misread our scriptures and misunderstood our prophecies. Jesus wasn't the Messiah. The Messiah would establish universal peace, rebuild the temple, and usher in the age of redemption. That had not happened. My convictions brought peace to my heart. I was not looking for anything more. I did not feel lacking. I believed I was walking truthfully. It was a Thursday afternoon in early spring. I had just finished counseling a young couple about to marry. We talked about ketubah language and family expectations. I was on my way home to prepare my Shabbat sermon, which I was especially looking forward to because it would focus on Parashat Vayikra and the meaning of sacrifice. As I walked through the synagogue lobby, I noticed a sudden tightness in my chest. At first, I assumed it was indigestion or a pulled muscle. I brushed it off. There was always anxiety before Shabbat. There is so much to prepare for and so many people to care for. However, the tightness persisted. It moved slowly, then quickly, up into my shoulders and down my left arm. My breathing became shallow. I paused, attempting to keep my balance on the wall. My vision blurred slightly. Nonetheless, I told myself it was nothing. I could not be having a heart attack. I was only 52. I ate well. I walked every day. I had no family history. Miriam had waited for me at home. When I walked through the door, I tried to smile. She immediately realized something was wrong. She walked over and said, "You're pale. What is wrong?" "There is only slight pressure. It will pass," I muttered, waving her away. She did not buy it. "Sit. I'm calling the doctor." "No, please give me a moment." I tried to stand up straighter, but the pain was like a wave crashing through my chest. My kneecaps buckled. I collapsed into the dining room chair and clutched my chest. Miriam's expression shifted from concern to panic. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. Her voice trembled but remained composed as she delivered our address. The following few minutes were chaotic. My breathing became laborious. Sweat ran down my face. I felt like my entire body was collapsing on itself. The pain was not sharp. It was crushing, like an iron weight holding me down. I wanted to pray, but I couldn't find the right words. I wanted to tell Miriam I was sorry and that I loved her, but even that was beyond me. Paramedics rushed into the house and began working quickly. I could hear them talking, but they seemed far away. Their voices were muffled, and their faces were distorted. One of them inquired whether I could hear him. I attempted to nod, but my body would not respond. As they lifted me onto the stretcher, I caught one last look at Miriam. She stood frozen near the doorway, her hand covering her mouth and tears streaming down her cheeks. Then everything faded. The pain, the noise, the light, just silence. Subsequently, nothing was heard. The next thing I remember is feeling weightless. No pain, no sound. Don't panic. Only stillness. At first, I assumed I had passed out. But then I noticed something unusual. I was aware. I was not just vaguely conscious, but completely aware, more so than I had ever been before. My senses were sharp and heightened, but I could not feel my body. I was not lying down. I was not standing. I was not anywhere. Then I saw it. Below me, yes, there was a scene that I should never have seen. 2 paramedics are hovering over a man on a stretcher in my dining room. One was pressing rhythmically on his chest while the other shouted numbers and instructions to prepare defibrillator pads. It only took a moment to realize that the man on the stretcher was me. My initial reaction was not fear. There was confusion. The confusion was deep and disorienting. How did I see myself from above? How was I hearing the paramedics' voices, clear but distant, as if I were underwater? Miriam was crouched in the hallway, praying, her face buried in her hands. I wanted to scream out her name. I wanted to tell her that I was fine, or at least to make sure she heard me. However, when I tried, nothing came out. No voice. No sound. I didn't even feel my breath. I tried to get closer and reach out, but there was no arm to extend. My presence hovered, like a thought that couldn't settle. The scene felt both immediate and distant. I was watching it unfold, but it didn't feel like mine. I saw my body, pale, limp, and lifeless, and felt a strange combination of detachment and grief. It wasn't horrifying. It was filled with sorrow. I experienced sorrow not for myself, but for those who remained engulfed in the moment. Miriam, the paramedics, and my children had no idea what was happening. I began to understand what was going on. I was out of my body. Not metaphorically. Literally. I'm not sure how long I remained there. Time seemed irrelevant. It was as if I existed outside of it. I continued to watch the paramedics, who were now using paddles. I noticed my body jolt from the shock. One of them cursed beneath his breath. Another checked for a pulse, shook his head, and resumed compressions. Someone said, "We're losing him." But I thought I was right here. I am not gone. I'm right here. Still, I couldn't get them to hear me. I couldn't make myself move. A strange calm began to settle on me. It was not a sense of comfort, but rather a sense of quietness. I wasn't panicking anymore. I was not trying to fight it. I just watched. Detached. In that stillness, something began to shift. The room around me dimmed. The scene was not darker. It was simply less real. The scene's urgency faded into the background, as if a television was gradually muted. I could feel myself pulling away, not dragged but gently drawn. Deep down, I understood that I was entering a new phase. Whatever happened next, I was no longer connected to the world I knew. The edges of my awareness dimmed as I stepped away from the scene below. The walls of my house, the ambulance's flashing lights, and the paramedics' frantic movements. Everything faded like mist under the sun. Something distinct from darkness took its place. It was an entirely different entity. Light. However, this light is not the same as the light we commonly perceive. This light didn't come from a lamp or the sun. It did not shine on anything. It was the space. It did not cast shadows. It did not have a source. It surrounded, filled, and welcomed me. It was alive. That is the only way I can explain it. The light had presence. It was more than just brightness. It was intelligence. It was warm, aware, and welcoming. It pulsed gently, almost as if it was breathing. And with each pulse, I felt something deeper settle inside me. Peace, clarity, and love in their purest form. The warmth was overwhelming, not in the sense of heat, but of being known and embraced. It penetrated every part of my being, including areas I was unaware existed. My fear began to subside. The sorrow I felt floating above my body remained, but it was now wrapped in comfort, as if a parent was holding a crying child. There was no sound in the traditional sense, but the space itself communicated. The communication was not through words, but through understanding. I felt it, like a quiet message etched into the air around me, getting closer. That simple invitation sparked something within me. It was a gentle, yet irresistible pull. I paused. It was not so much out of fear as it was out of uncertainty. I'd spent my entire life researching what happens after death, and I never imagined this. The events unfolded differently than anticipated. The present was neither the soul's rest nor a heavenly courtroom. There was more. I'd never doubted God's existence, but I had always imagined him as out of reach, shrouded in mystery and holiness so great that we could never get too close. This light, this presence, was holy but not remote. It was nearby, intimate. It recognized me, and that scared me. It was not harsh, but rather authentic. I could feel it looking at me, not with judgment, but with complete clarity. It recognized who I was. Not only had I done things, but I had also changed over time. Nevertheless, I felt no condemnation. It was only an invitation. Nonetheless, I resisted. A small voice within me, trained by years of Torah study, careful lines in halakhic texts, and lectures on books and boundaries, whispered that the situation didn't fit. Something was off. I didn't have a framework for what I was seeing. But another, deeper, more honest voice spoke, and this is the truth. This is what you've been hoping for. I could not deny it. The light did not contradict the God I had worshipped. It felt like his fullness, as if the veils I'd always looked through were being gently drawn back. And within that light, I felt another presence. Not separate, but distinct. Someone. I hadn't seen a face yet, but I knew someone was present. Watching. Waiting. It was not with impatience, but with the calmness of someone who had always expected this moment to come. The sensation intensified as I got closer to the light. I felt as if I was being drawn to something. It wasn't just a specific place, but also a specific person. I was welcomed by someone who had known me since before I knew myself. And in that moment, I realized I wasn't simply being welcomed. I was being called. As I moved deeper into the light, the presence I'd sensed began to manifest. At first, it was just an impression, like a silhouette behind a luminous curtain. But the figure took a slow step forward, as if the veil were being lifted, rather than approaching from a distance. He stood in front of me. He exuded a majestic yet non-imposing presence. The beauty is radiant, but not blinding. There was a purity in him that words cannot express. He exuded a light that seemed to emanate from him rather than shine upon him. His robe flowed like soft wind, glowing with a gentle white fire. His face. Even now, I'm struggling to describe it. There was no flaw and no harshness. His features were strong but gentle, timeless, and human. But it was his eyes that broke me. They were the eyes of someone who had known me for ages. They saw right through me, past everything I'd built up, past my knowledge, confidence, and questions, to something deeper. They did so not in violation, but with a kindness that tore me apart. I wanted to look away, but I could not. I knew who he was. Despite my reluctance, I was aware of his identity. I had looked into him from a distance, dismissed him, and refuted the claims of those who followed him. But now, standing in front of me, I couldn't refuse him. There was no room for debate or theological arguments. The truth about his identity was not revealed to me. I could clearly sense it. This was Jesus. The name thundered inside me without making a sound. I recoiled slightly. The hesitation was not due to anger, but rather because everything within me started to crumble. No, it cannot be. My knees gave way. I collapsed, not from force, but from the weight of what I now knew. I had spent my life looking for the truth. I believed I had discovered it in the Torah, and to some extent I had. But standing in front of him, I realized I had only seen a portion, a shadow of something greater. He moved closer. He didn't look down at me. He kneeled. "David," he said, "this is my name." I had never heard that tone before. It was not just a tone of love, but also one of authority. He seemed to be calling something in me rather than just me. "You've been seeking God your entire life," he said. "You have adored him, served him." He taught his word with devotion. Tears streamed down my face. I wished to speak, to explain. My goal is to stand up for my beliefs. However, no words came. "You've been faithful," he said. "However, you have not grasped the entirety of his plan." The words pierced me not with pain, but with the truth. I felt exposed. I felt loved. I have learned everything. I am completely certain. I have full confidence. Nothing prepared me for this. He was not angry. He wasn't there to shame me. He came here to reveal. "You're familiar with the scriptures," he proceeded. "You followed the path of obedience. However, the Torah was never the destination. It was a signpost." His voice conveyed both sorrow and hope. "You honored the covenant," he said, "but the covenant pointed at me." My heart broke. It's not because I felt betrayed, but because I realized I missed him all these years. I've been missing him for all these years. I have memorized every verse, all prayers. Nevertheless, he did not reject me. He welcomed me. He saw everything I was and wasn't, but drew me in. I wept, not because I was condemned, but because I was being offered something greater than I had ever experienced. Truth, wholeness, fulfillment. However, a small part of me resisted. Why? I asked him in my heart. Why now? Why me? He looked at me, his eyes burning with compassion. "I love you," he said, "and because you are prepared to see." As I knelt before him, trembling from the weight of his presence, the light around us changed. It did not fade. Rather, it deepened, grew richer. I sensed a shift within myself rather than without. Jesus reached out, not physically, but with something greater, and I realized I was no longer just standing in that light. I was inside something. A vision. I found myself on a mountaintop. The wind swept through my hair. I recognized Mount Moriah right away. I saw Abraham, aged and steady, his face set in determination. Isaac walked beside him, young and unaware, carrying the wood for his sacrifice. I'd taught this passage hundreds of times. This passage serves as a test of faith. It requires the highest level of obedience. But now I was witnessing it unfold in real time, rather than as a story. I could feel the tension in Abraham's heart. I could hear Isaac's quiet trust. I saw the knife rise. Just before it fell, the angel cried out. Abraham paused. A ram appeared trapped in the thicket. Then the scene changed. Another hill. Another sun. This time there was no ram. I saw Jesus carrying a cross, blood on his brow and body broken. However, unlike Isaac, he was not unaware. He knew. And yet, he walked forward. Willingly. I gave a gasp. The story of Isaac was more than just a test. It was foreshadowing. Abraham's son was saved. However, God's own son wasn't. Before I could process it, another scene appeared. The wilderness. The Israelites were ill, dying from venomous snake bites. Moses held a bronze serpent high on a pole, commanding the people to look at it and live. It was an unusual story in the Torah that I had never fully understood. Why would God ask them to look at the image of the very thing that had hurt them? And then, overlaid on the scene, I saw Jesus on the cross, his arms spread wide. I remembered a verse from the New Testament that I had previously read and ignored. The Son of Man must be lifted up, just as Moses did with the serpent in the wilderness. My mouth became dry. My chest tightened. These were not coincidences. They were not clever Christian interpretations. The connections were exact, precise, divine. Then came the prophets. The prophets presented me with a beaten, bloodied, and despised man. His appearance was so disfigured that he could barely be considered human. Isaiah 53. People hated and shunned him, referring to him as a sorrowful man. He was pierced for our transgressions and crushed for our sins. His wounds have healed us. I saw it, not symbolically, literally. Then Zechariah. They will grieve for me, the one they pierced, like an only son. That verse has always confused me. Who is this me? Would it be possible to penetrate God? But now I understand. That was him. Jesus. And then Psalm 22. I heard the words echo. They've pierced my hands and feet. They divide my clothes and draw lots to determine who gets what. The focus was on each verse and image. All of the shadows I'd spent my life studying had substance. I believed in the Torah, prophets, and writings. I'd taught, cherished, and defended them. But I'd missed the thread that connected them all. Him. Jesus was not contradicting the scriptures. He was doing an excellent job fulfilling them. I turned to him, shaken. How? How could I have not noticed it? His gaze was compassionate rather than accusing. He said, "You searched the scriptures, but you didn't know which one they spoke about." My knees gave out again. I was undone. He had been there all along, hidden in plain view. And somehow I'd missed him. The light around us shifted again, not dimming but expanding, as if the veil of reality was being peeled away. I felt Jesus beside me, but he did not speak. Instead, I knew exactly what was going on. Someone showed me something hardly any people ever see. Heaven. The moment I walked in, I knew I wasn't in a place as we know it. It wasn't geography, it was presence. Love permeated everything. It was not the love we commonly refer to on earth, nor was it affection or emotion, but rather a purer and more consuming love. It wasn't just around me, it was me. It was in every thought, movement, and breath. The peace was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Instead of silence, there was a singing stillness. A type of music that stemmed not from instruments, but from existence itself, a harmony woven into the very fabric of reality. I looked around and noticed people. They were not bodies as we know them, but rather beings of light and happiness. They moved effortlessly, unhindered by time or gravity. There was no sadness in their eyes or regret on their faces. They exuded a calm joy, as if they were finally home. They were well known. That was what struck me the most. Each person was fully known and loved. There was no pretense, fear, or shame. They were whole. I witnessed relationships, people reuniting, laughing, and embracing without words. I felt their unity. Their unity was not uniformity, but rather a shared purpose and spirit. There was no competition, no ego, and no need to demonstrate anything. They were in perfect harmony, both with each other and with the source of all things. I felt him. God wasn't hiding here. He was here. His presence enveloped everything, akin to a comforting breeze that was imperceptible yet permeated every aspect of your existence. I turned toward Jesus. His face was illuminated in a way that made even the radiant realm appear brighter. This, he explained, is not a prize. It represents the fulfillment of love. A relationship is brought to completion. He looked across the vast expanse, where the people were in quiet harmony. He explained that they are here because they knew me, not because they obeyed the rules, because they accepted what was freely offered. I stood silent and overwhelmed. My entire life had been based on obedience, discipline, and striving. And here I was, witnessing a joy I had never imagined possible, born of relationship rather than effort. Didn't they earn it? I asked. No, Jesus replied gently. They received it. He was not criticizing the law or the beauty of Torah. He was directing me to its destination. The law was constantly pointing here, not as a ladder to climb, but as a guidepost to follow. I would rather not leave. A part of me already ached at the thought, but I knew there was more I needed to see. Everything changed as soon as the light and joy of heaven entered my soul. The warmth faded. The music ceased, not abruptly, but gradually, like a fire burning down to embers. The music ceased. The harmony disappeared. Then came the cold. It wasn't physically cold. It was an absence. There was an absence of peace, presence, and love. The air, or whatever this place was made of, felt heavy and thick with sadness. I no longer stood in radiance. I was in the dark. The darkness was actually a suffocating shadow that seemed to press in from every direction. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was a rejection. I could barely see at first, but as my eyes adjusted, I began to recognize figures. They moved very slowly, if at all. Some were curled up on themselves. Others went in circles, grasping for things that weren't there. Their forms appeared human but were dimmed and faded, like the outlines of who they once were. I observed their faces. What I saw in them was not torment from an external source. It was inward. Grief. Regret. A deep sorrow that could not be expressed in words. These souls were not being punished with fire or chained in anguish. They were grieving over a separation that they knew could have been avoided. They were longing. I longed for the light. For the present, I had just left. They knew they'd rejected it. Their suffering was not due to their ignorance, but rather because they had made a different choice. Jesus was right beside me again. I could feel his presence, but it felt distant, like a gentle whisper in a thunderstorm. This is the reality of separation, he explained, his voice heavy with sadness. This is not punishment, David. Consequence. I did not speak. I could not. They were loved, he added. Everyone. Each person is unique, just like you. Love, however, cannot be forced. It invites. Rejection of love results in separation. I wanted to look away. I wanted to forget what I was seeing. But I could not. A woman stood at the edge of a large void. Her gaze focused on something far beyond it. Perhaps it was the light I'd seen. Tears fell silently down her cheeks. She reached forward repeatedly, as if to touch something she once knew. Others wandered, as if making the same decisions over and over. Others sat motionless, numb, and lost. I felt a cry rise within me. This was not a cry for myself, but rather for them. How long? I asked Jesus. How long are they here? He did not respond directly. Instead, he stated that truth must be chosen. They would not have received it then, and they will not receive it now. I broke. My heart felt as if it were splitting in two. I had lived my life believing in justice and consequences. But the pressure was unbearable. It wasn't unfair, but it was definitive. The pain was not in flames or chains, but in realizing what they had missed and still choosing to be apart. Jesus turned to me, his eyes filled with compassion and grief. This is why I came, he explained quietly. He intended not to condemn, but to save. And at that moment, I understood. He was not frustrated with them. He was not condemning them. He'd wept for them. He continued to do so. After the darkness, the light returned, not abruptly, but like a dawn breaking over the deep night. He embraced me again, and I cried again. this time over the pain I had witnessed. Jesus stood beside me, initially silent, allowing the gravity of the situation to sink in. Then, without saying anything, we moved, not walking but passing through something unseen, until we stood in front of what appeared to be an open scroll. But this scroll was not made from parchment. It was alive. Words rose from the surface, glowing and shifting as if etched in eternal fire. The covenant, he explained. You've loved it, protected it, and lived by it. I nodded, trembling. And you were correct to honor it, he added, because it is holy. But you were never intended to carry it alone. The scroll opened wider. I saw the Torah again, Genesis, Exodus, and Leviticus. The prophets come next. The Psalms. The writings. As I looked, something happened. The passages began to weave together, akin to a tightening of threads. Genesis 22 features Abraham and Isaac. Exodus 12, the blood of the lamb over the doorposts. Numbers 21, the bronze serpent was lifted up. Psalm 22, they pierced my fingers and toes. Isaiah 53, our sins have crushed him. Zechariah 12, they'll focus on me, the one they've pierced. Each verse, event, and prophecy gained new meaning. These were not random texts. These texts were fragments of a divine puzzle, which I had studied throughout my life, but had never fully comprehended. I did not come to abolish the law or the prophets, Jesus stated calmly, but to fulfill them. The words pierced me, not in condemnation, but as a sword cutting away blindness. I'd always taught that the covenant with Israel was eternal. God's promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob stood unbreakable, and I still believe it. But now I realize what I had never understood. The covenant was incomplete in itself. It was the beginning, a foundation. There was a path that led beyond itself. To him, every sacrifice, he stated, every festival, every law pointed forward. It was not about erasing the past, but about completing it. I struggled to breathe under the weight of the realization. I whispered for years. I assumed we were still waiting. He spoke gently. So I came.